1985. My ex-wife and I were sleeping. There was a small sliver of light coming in through the window from a street light, so the room and bed were dimly visible. Our black Pomeranian was at the end of the bed, asleep. I dreamt that I woke up, reached down to pet him, and he turned into a glossy black bivalve oyster thing, which opened up to reveal rows of gleaming glass teeth. I woke up to my ex backpedaling up the bed over the pillows towards the wall. I asked, "What's wrong?" She said, "What is that shiny black clam thing with the teeth at the end of the bed? Where's the dog?" We had had the same nightmare at the same time. This still gives me a chill. I was taking the trash out at night, super remote area, so I know for a fact we're the only ones around here. I'm getting close to the road, and I hear very clearly, "Help me," from a female voice. Even knowing there's such a slim chance of there being another living person around, I still feel like I should look around and check it out in case I wasn't just hearing things and someone actually needs help. I take about 2 steps in the direction I thought I heard it. I hear a giggle in the same exact voice. I turn around and walk promptly back up the driveway because fuck that shit. Anyone who actually needed help wouldn't be laughing, I don't think. After my little brother was murdered, the next morning, I was talking with a friend, and he mentioned this other dude I went to high school with who had a younger brother who died in a car accident a couple weeks before. Later that day, I pull out a slip of paper with this other dude's number and name on it from my pants. I vaguely remember running into him a year or so before this at a club where he gave me his number. I swear I had worn and washed these jeans at least a dozen times since I had run into this dude. It still makes no sense how that paper was there and I only found it then. I called the dude and we talked a bunch. It really helped me deal with the situation. I was on vacation in Florida visiting a friend. We were walking on the beach on a perfectly sunny day when everything went black for a second. I thought it was weird, but explained it away, thinking that my eyes were playing tricks on me, until he looked at me and said, "Did everything go black for a second?" Every night, I go to bed about 2 hours before my husband. I always wake up when he comes into the room. One night, he was gaming with a friend, and it was hours later I heard him sneak into the room and crawl across the floor so he could pop up and scare me. I felt the floor kind of shake and felt him bump clumsily against the side of the bed in the dark. I held out my hand and asked him not to scare me. I was already scared enough and begged him to just take my hand and come to bed. I couldn't see anything in the room, but knew he was there and just waited for him to jump up so I could move on and go back to sleep. That's when I heard him talking to his friend in the other room. I was frozen. I know there's sleep paralysis or lucid dreaming or something that explains this, but I would have sworn on my son's life that someone had crawled across the floor and jostled the bed. Eventually, I worked out of the fear enough to grab my phone and text my husband to come in and turn on the lights and check under the bed. But holy shit, it boggles me how real it felt. My friend Sarah was in a nightclub, drunk off her face, when she got an overwhelming urge to tell a total stranger that her leg hurts. Edit, it didn't. All a bit strange, she ignores it, but it doesn't stop. So she walks up to this guy and says, "I know this is crazy, but I've got a huge urge to tell you my leg hurts. I know that's crazy, again, sorry." But he burst into tears. Turns out his dad had just died, and they made a pact before that. If there was an afterlife, he would send a message to him saying a totally random phrase, so there could be no mistakes, which they've decided was, "I've hurt my leg." In college, I took a journalism class where one of the assignments was to write an obituary for one of my grandparents. The professor told us to write it on a deceased grandparent, but if all of your grandparents were still alive, we had to choose one. In my case, all of my grandparents were alive. I procrastinated actually doing the assignment until the night before it was due because it seemed like a morbid assignment, especially once all of my grandparents were still alive. Scramming for an easy grandparent to write about, I gave my mom a call and asked her for some basic biographical information about my maternal grandfather. As we were talking about my grandpa's career, my mom couldn't recall the name of one of the companies he worked at. She lectured me about waiting until the last minute to write the assignment because it was late, 10:30 p.m., my grandpa's time. However, she said she would give him a call to see if he was still awake and be able to answer that question once my assignment was due the following morning. When my mom called my grandpa answered the phone in a panic. My grandma frantically explained that the paramedics had just arrived and were performing CPR on my grandpa because he had stopped breathing and lost consciousness. My mom was able to stay on the phone with my grandma until they took my grandpa to the hospital, where he was declared dead. In the time my mom and I had been talking on the phone about my grandpa's obituary, he was dying. His death was entirely unexpected at that. Although he was in his 80s, he was the healthiest of my grandparents at the time. We ended up using the obituary I wrote for that writing assignment as his actual obituary. Still freaks me out when I think about the timing. I was driving about 50 miles per hour, and a car ran a stop sign on an on-ramp and pulled out right in front of me. I remember bracing for impact, and then I was about 300 yards down the highway, and I saw the car at the ramp in my rear view, just about to pull out. This happened around 1991. It's the middle of the night. I'm standing in my sister's living room, and it must be a full moon because even though it's around 1 in the morning and the lights are off, I can see clearly. There's a mixing bowl with popcorn kernels in the bottom of the floor in front of the TV, and some rental VHS in a pile nearby. I hear a noise and turn around to see my sister's normally very friendly Labrador Retriever looking like Cujo. Fangs bared, snarling, hackles raised. Suddenly there's a bright flash of light and I wake up like I hit the bed from a great height. I think, that was a weird dream. Eventually I fall back to sleep, and in the morning I call my sister, planning to tell her the story. But she preempts me by telling me about the weird thing that happened in the night. They woke up to the sound of the dog snarling at about 1 in the morning. Her husband thought there was a prowler in the house, got a gun, and went to find the dog. She was standing in the living room snarling at the middle of the room. He couldn't see anyone, so he flipped on the light. No one was there. The dog instantly stopped snarling and walked to her bed like nothing had happened. He checked the property and went back to bed. We talked a bit, and I found out they watched some rental movies, and of course we had popcorn. Why? My sister is a little woo-woo at times, so I decided not to tell her about my night. She lived about 450 miles away, by the way. About 2 years ago, I went to collect my husband from the ferry after work. My husband got into the car, and as I was driving very slowly out of the car park, we both noticed 2 people standing a few meters in front of our car. It looked as though they were strangers, older-looking professionals, both walking to their separate cars in different areas of the car park. The man was reaching into his side bag, and the lady was further ahead than the man, with her head turned to the right. I know the exact positions they were in because they were completely frozen on the spot. My husband and I sat there watching the frozen strangers, not saying anything to each other. And then all of a sudden, it was like someone pressed play, and the 2 strangers just continued on like nothing had happened. My husband and I promised to each other that we would never forget how weird the experience was. I can't remember exactly how long they stayed frozen like that, but it was long enough to freak us both out. I once clocked out of work at 6 p.m., like I always did at the time, and began my hour-long train ride home. After I had found a seat, I went to sleep and woke up just before my station. From the station, it is a short bus journey, 10 to 15 minutes to reach home. During the entire journey, I didn't use my phone and I don't wear a watch, so I didn't really notice the time anywhere. When I reached home, My family surprised me with, "You're home early, everything alright?" I look at the wall clock, and it is about to be 6 p.m. I was too shocked to understand what happened, checked other watches, cell phones, etc., and the time is absolutely right. A few days later, the admin emailed us the timesheets for the month, times clocking in and out, and every single day for me was around the same, 6 p.m. So it certainly wasn't me having left work earlier. To this day, I haven't figured out how I gained between 60 to 90 minutes that day. If you've had any creepy glitch in the matrix experiences, let me know in the comments down below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.